He hadn't spoken to anyone in days, but that morning, a child's voice broke everything open. The first thing you'd notice about him was his silence. Not the comfortable silence of a library, but the heavy quiet of a forgotten grave. His workshop was his tomb, a place of dust and forgotten things, a graveyard for what was once loved. The air smelled of wood shavings and old varnish, the ghosts of other people's lives. He wasn't creating beauty, he was burying it. He moved with a quiet precision. His hands, once quick and lethal, now meticulously mending what was already broken. A splintered rocking chair, a forgotten music box. He was a master of his craft, but a failure at his own life. The sunlight barely entered his home, filtered by blinds that kept the world out, as if he himself had decided he was not worthy of its warmth. He was a man built of stone, a fortress of indifference, a soldier who had won wars in faraway lands, but had lost the battle for his own heart. He avoided the living, the breathing, the ones who could see the emptiness in his eyes. His home was a sanctuary against emotion, a place where he could hide from the crushing weight of his past, a place where every object he repaired was a mirror of his own brokenness. He was a ghost in his own life, a man haunting the memories of what he had lost. He had spent years building walls, creating a fortress of silence, only to have a single, innocent sound crumble it all to dust. Then, on a day just like any other, a new sound echoed in the silent workshop. It was a soft, melodic tune, hummed by a young woman named Clara, an intern hired to help. The sound was out of place, a dissonance in the symphony of his despair. It was the same melody his daughter used to hum as a child. A sudden, sharp pain lanced through him, a phantom pain that had a name, a face, and a memory. A little girl with a crooked smile and a love for humming melodies. He froze, the sandpaper slipping from his fingers. A quiet surrender. The past and the present, a quiet collision, a moment that would change everything. He looked down at his hands. They were gnarled and scarred, not just from years of work, but from a lifetime of holding on to pain. He looked at the half-repaired table, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something other than emptiness. He felt a tremor of life, a whisper of a possibility he had long since buried. A possibility that maybe, just maybe, some things could be fixed. A man, a ghost of his former self, stood in a dusty workshop, his hands trembling, a child's song echoing in his mind. The silence of the room was now filled with the hum of a memory, the melody of a ghost, the sound of a man beginning to feel again. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to this channel. This isn't just another sad story, it's about what happens when someone finally chooses to feel again, to let a little bit of light into a life that was once shrouded in darkness. It's about a man who had given up on himself, and the unexpected person who saw past the silence and into the soul he thought was gone forever. It's about the quiet hope that lies in the heart of despair, the tiny spark that can ignite a new beginning. Stay with us. His past wasn't a story told in grand gestures, but in a series of small, unforgivable moments. He had been a soldier, a man trained to be tough, to be resilient, but the war he brought home wasn't one of bullets and bombs. It was a silent, internal war against the memories of his own childhood, a war he was losing. His father, a man forged in the hard times, had taught him that emotion was a weakness, a luxury he couldn't afford. And so he learned to bury his feelings, to become a fortress of stone, a silent, unyielding presence. This was the legacy he unknowingly passed on to his daughter. He was a father who was present but absent, a man who provided but never connected. His love was a heavy, suffocating blanket, not a warm, comforting hug. He would remember her small hands, reaching for his, only to be met with the cold, unyielding wall of his indifference. He remembered her bright, questioning eyes, searching for a sign of affection, a glimmer of warmth, only to be met with his Vacant stare. He was a master of his craft, but a failure at fatherhood. He was a man who could fix anything but the broken heart of his own child. The silence between them grew, a chasm that widened with every passing year. It wasn't born of hatred, but of a profound, painful lack of understanding. A daughter who desperately needed a father, and a father who didn't know how to be one. Then, the morning arrived that was different from all the others. A young woman, not a child, entered his world. Her name was Clara, and she was an intern from a local college. She wasn't loud or boisterous. She was a quiet, observant soul, with eyes that saw the world in shades of meaning he had long since forgotten. Her presence was a gentle invasion, a soft whisper in his silent fortress. Her first task was a child's table, a small, splintered piece of furniture, a miniature version of the world he was trying to fix. As she worked, she would hum the same melody he'd heard that morning, a melody that transported him back in time to a tiny hand in his, a crooked smile on a small face. Clara noticed everything. She saw the way his hand paused over a child's toy, the way his breath hitched, a silent, almost imperceptible sigh. She didn't pry or ask questions. She simply worked, and as she worked, she talked. Not about her life, but about the piece of wood in front of her. She spoke of the grain, the feel of the varnish, the story the nicks and scratches told. She was a storyteller, weaving narratives out of broken wood and faded memories. He found himself listening, a silent spectator to her quiet passion. It was an unfamiliar feeling, this connection, this shared space. It was a small crack in the wall he had so carefully built. A tiny sliver of light he wasn't sure he was ready for. Don't scroll yet. What he finds next might break you in the best way. Because this isn't just about a broken table or a lost father. It's about a man who had lost his way and the quiet, unassuming soul who was about to show him the path home. It's about the silent conversation that happens between two people when words are no longer enough. It's about the courage it takes to confront a past you've spent a lifetime running from, and the unexpected hope that waits on the other side. This is about what happens when you finally stop trying to fix the world and start trying to fix yourself. The small table began to take shape under Clara's hands. The splinters were sanded, the nicks filled. It was a slow, deliberate process, a mirror of the healing he so desperately needed. He watched her, a silent observer, a man who knew how to fix wood, but not how to mend a heart. She was a reflection of the daughter he had lost, a haunting reminder of what could have been. And yet she was also a beacon of hope, a living testament to the possibility of a different kind of life. A life filled with connection, with communication, with the simple joy of sharing a quiet moment with another human being. One afternoon, as Clara worked on the table, she hummed a familiar tune, one his daughter used to sing. It was a child's tune, innocent and simple. He stopped what he was doing and turned to face her. The silence in the workshop, usually a source of comfort, suddenly felt suffocating. He saw her, not as an intern, but as a ghost from his past. A tiny hand reached out, a question in her eyes. He had the opportunity to be the man he never was, to tell her the story behind the tune, to explain the pain in his heart, but the words caught in his throat. He remained silent, a statue of regret, a man who had forgotten how to speak the language of the heart. He was a man of action, not of words. He found a new piece of wood, a splintered log, and began to work on it with a ferocity he hadn't felt in years. The sound of the sander was a loud, jarring noise in the silent workshop, a violent protest against the quiet melody that had so unexpectedly entered his life. He was trying to drown out the past, to silence the voice in his head that was screaming with regret. Clara, understanding his silent pain, simply stopped humming. She went back to her work, her movements quiet and deliberate, a silent act of compassion. She didn't judge him. She didn't question his actions. She simply gave him the space he needed, a quiet understanding he had never received before. It was a small gesture with an immense impact, a sign that she was not there to fix him, but to witness him. He was a man who had spent a lifetime running from his past, and now, for the first time, he was being forced to confront it. The broken table, the quiet intern, the haunting melody, they were all pieces of a puzzle he had spent a lifetime trying to ignore. He looked at Clara, her head bent over the small table, her fingers tracing the imperfections. He saw a reflection of himself in her meticulous work, the desire to make something whole again. But she was not just fixing wood, she was mending a life. She was a mirror, a reflection of the man he could be if he just had the courage to put down his tools and pick up the pieces of his own life. He knew he couldn't run forever. The past was a relentless hunter, and the future was an unknown wilderness. The choice was clear. He could continue to hide in the silent sanctuary of his workshop, or he could take a leap of faith, a step into the light. He looked at his hands again, not as tools for work, but as instruments for healing. He looked at the broken table, and for the first time he saw not a job to be done, but a lesson to be learned, a lesson about patience, about compassion, about the quiet power of mending what is broken. The silence was still there, but now it was a companion, not an enemy. The silence between them was no longer a barrier, but a bridge. Clara continued her work on the child's table, and he, in a quiet, almost imperceptible way, began to change. He still didn't speak much, but his actions spoke volumes. He would find a specific tool she needed before she even asked for it, a small act of foresight that showed he was paying attention. He would leave a thermos of hot coffee by her workbench on cold mornings, a silent gesture of care. He was a man of gestures, not of words, and Clara, in her wisdom, understood this silent language. She would simply nod, a small smile on her face, and go back to her work, a quiet acknowledgement that her presence was no longer a threat, but a comfort. The workshop, once a tomb of his memories, was slowly becoming a shared space, a place where two souls, one broken and one mending, could exist in quiet harmony. One afternoon, as Clara was organizing the dusty shelves, she found a small wooden box tucked away behind a stack of old magazines. It was a beautiful thing, intricately carved, but covered in a thick layer of grime and dust. She knew instinctively that it was meant for him. She began to clean it, her small, deliberate movements a silent question. She didn't open it. She simply cleaned the exterior, revealing the detailed carvings of intertwining vines and flowers, and left it on his workbench. He saw it, a small, polished beacon of a past he had tried so hard to bury. He looked at the box, his heart a frantic drumbeat in his chest. He knew what was inside. He had placed it there years ago, a time capsule of a life he had purposefully forgotten. He picked up the box, his hands trembling slightly. He opened it, a silent, almost painful act of courage. Inside, there were no letters or photos, only a single, small, hand-drawn picture. It was a drawing of him, his face a simple circle with 2 dots for eyes and a small, crooked line for a mouth. A stick figure with a giant, lopsided sun shining over his head. Written in a child's scrawl at the bottom were the words, "My Daddy." He stared at the drawing, a silent storm raging within him. It was a time he had forgotten, a moment of pure, unadulterated love, a moment he had consciously erased from his mind. The drawing was a mirror, reflecting a man he didn't recognize, a father who had been loved so deeply, a man who had chosen to be so alone. He held the drawing in his hands, a fragile piece of paper that held the weight of a lifetime of regret. He saw himself in the drawing, the man his daughter had seen him as, a man with a lopsided smile, a sun shining over his head, a man who was capable of joy, of love, a man he had long since forgotten. The drawing was a key, unlocking a door he had kept locked for so long. He remembered the day she had given it to him. He had been working in his old workshop, and she had come in, her small hand clutching the piece of paper. He had been preoccupied, had barely looked at it, had simply taken it and put it away. Now he saw the depth of his neglect, the profound silence of his absence. The drawing was not a memory, but a condemnation. He looked at the drawing, and for the first time in his life, he felt a profound, heart-wrenching pain. A pain he had been running from, a pain he had been trying to bury. It wasn't the pain of loss. It was the pain of regret, the pain of knowing he could have been better, could have done more. The drawing was a silent accusation, a question he couldn't answer. He looked at Clara, and for the first time he saw not an intern, but a witness to his silent pain. He wanted to explain, to tell her the story behind the drawing, to confess his sins, but the words were still trapped in his throat, a testament to a lifetime of silence. He was a man who had built his own prison, and now he was trapped within its walls. He was a master of his craft, but a failure at fatherhood. He looked at the drawing, and then at the broken table, and for the first time he saw the connection. They were both broken, both in need of mending. But while the table could be fixed with tools and wood glue, his heart, his life, required a different kind of tool. It required courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to face the ghosts of his past. The drawing was not just a memory, it was a call to action, a plea for him to finally start the work of mending himself. He knew he couldn't continue to live in a world of silence, in a house of broken things. He had to face the truth, had to confront the man he had become. Keep watching, because this moment, this choice, will change everything. It was a moment of profound clarity, a silent epiphany. He was not just a man who fixed things. He was a man who had broken things. He was not a victim of his past. He was a prisoner of his own making. The drawing was a key, a map, a guide to a new life, a life where he could finally be whole again. He looked at the drawing again, his heart a mixture of pain and hope. He saw a way out, a path to redemption, a chance to finally be the man his daughter had seen him as, a man with a lopsided smile and a sun shining over his head. The choice was his. The drawing was a ghost from the past, a silent plea he could no longer ignore. He looked at it, his heart a battlefield of emotions he had long since buried. He had two choices: to burn the drawing, just as he had burned everything else, and return to his silent sanctuary of self-imposed exile, or to confront the ghost of his past and begin the long, painful work of mending his own life. The silence in the workshop, once a comfort, now felt like a suffocating shroud. He looked at Clara, at her, gentle hands working on the child's table, and he knew what he had to do. He couldn't continue to hide, not from her, not from himself. The drawing was not just a memory, it was an invitation to be the man his daughter had once seen him as, a man with a lopsided smile and a sun shining over his head. He walked to her workbench, the small drawing clutched in his hand. He didn't say a word. He simply placed it on the table, next to the child's table she was restoring. He knew she would understand. He knew she would see the silent confession in his gesture, the profound pain in his heart. She looked at the drawing, her eyes gentle and knowing. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer pity. She simply placed her hand over his, a silent gesture of solidarity, a quiet act of compassion. It was in that moment, in that shared silence, that he finally understood what it meant to be seen, to be acknowledged, not for what he did, but for who he was. A man who was broken, but was trying to be whole again. He then took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, he spoke, not in a loud voice, not in a desperate one, but in a whisper, filled with the weight of a lifetime of regret. He told her the story behind the drawing, the story of a father who was present but absent, a man who had forgotten how to love his own child. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply told the truth. He spoke of the day his daughter had given him the drawing, of his own indifference, of the quiet pain he had caused. He spoke of his own father, a man who had taught him that emotion was a weakness, a luxury he couldn't afford. He confessed his failures, his regrets, his fears. He was a man who had spent a lifetime running from his past, and now he was finally facing it. The final act of his silent confession was to take the small, hand-drawn picture and show it to Clara. He didn't just show her the drawing, he showed her the scene it depicted. It was a simple memory, one he had buried deep inside himself. He had been working in his workshop, and his daughter had come in, her face bright with a child's pure joy. She had made a small mistake on a toy he was building for her, and she was crying, a deep, heartbroken sob. He had looked at her, his heart a mixture of frustration and fear, and had simply held her. He had said nothing, but in his silence, in the quiet embrace, he had shown her a love he had never learned to express. And in that moment, in the safety of his embrace, she had looked at him, and for the first time she had seen not a stranger, but a father. She had seen the lopsided smile, the sun shining over his head. The drawing was not a condemnation, it was a testament to the one moment he had gotten it right, a testament to a love that had been there all along. He walked away with nothing, except for the one thing he thought he had lost forever: hope. He had finally found the courage to face his past, to confront the man he had become, and to start the long, painful work of mending himself. The workshop, once a tomb of his memories, was now a place of hope, a sanctuary of healing. The broken things he repaired were no longer just pieces of wood. They were a testament to the power of mending, of fixing what is broken, of making something whole again. He had started with a child's table, and now he was finally ready to work on himself. Because sometimes all it takes to save a life is listening when no one else does. The world never saw him, but today you did.